call this meeting to order. It is 8 a.m. and welcome to the meeting of February 21st, 2018. This is a meeting of council where we have just one item on the agenda. This is a work session for the 2018 municipal budget. We'll start with public comment. If there's, oh sorry, no, we need to start with the roll call. We need to start to make sure we've properly noticed this meeting. Have we properly noticed this meeting?
Yes,
all right.
we have.
And please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen,
Here.
Mr. Liverman,
Here.
Mr. Quinn,
Here.
Ms. Fraga. Here. Mayor Lefferts.
Here. All right, and now we'll start with comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. Do you have any comments that are not related to the budget? No? Okay. All right.
Welcome.
Then, yeah, thanks for coming.
Good morning. Good morning.
I also want to thank TV30 for filming this morning, and I'll turn it over to Mark Shield.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to begin this morning's work session by just giving you a quick overview of the budget books. Make sure everyone understands what's in the budget books. If you go through your budget books, you're going to have it in the beginning. This is just a summary of appropriations, and that will be your salary, wages, and other expense in a summary format for everyone. In addition to that, behind the expenditure, and that's called the expenditure summary, behind that is a detailed breakout of your salary and wages by departments, where you can see those details. And then on the final page, under that tab, you'll see the budget headcounts, which gives you a review of the number of full-time and part-time employees from 2015 through 2018 proposed budget. The next section is a revenue summary, which provides all the summary of all the revenue items. And then finally behind that, you will find by department the other expenses. And if you look through them, they're not in numerical order. I try to put them in the order of the department so that as you go through them, you'll know what's related to each department. And today what we'll do is, one, just give you an idea of where we are in the budget process and what are the next steps. Today we'll be going through some of the other expenses. We'll get some input from Mayor and Council in terms of some changes to the budget. We expect to introduce the budget Monday night. Introduction of the budget is really the beginning of the budget process. It is the first time where the budget becomes public, where the public can see what the budget looks like. We will continue to do our due diligence in March. I'll definitely set up meetings with individual council people who have any additional questions. We'll be working on some items that may be brought up today, may not be answered today. We'll answer those during the due diligence period. So let's just kind of start with an overview of the budget. So the first thing, and the biggest thing that you look at when we're talking about the budget is really, I want to start with the head count. Because that really gives you an idea. That's one of our biggest expenses in the budget, and really what drives our budget. So as I said, if you go to the expenditure summaries, the last page, you'll see the head count. One of the things that you'll notice is over the last couple of years, we've really been paying attention to managing our budget. And one of the things we've been looking at is head count and trying to make decisions in terms of reorganizations. And we've done a number of things, including reorganization with Access Princeton, shared services with the health officer, dispatch, to really make a difference. And as you can see, it really has shown that. If you look at the total head count from in 2015, it was 218 individuals full-time. The budget we're introducing this Monday night will be 207 employees. As you can see, there's a significant reduction there, and we'll continue to manage that process. And it just shows that we're making the right decisions and moving forward in terms of trying to just manage the headcount. On the expenditure side of the budget, as we have talked previously, we continue to make efforts to control the budget throughout the budget. And you'll see in this budget there are not a lot of areas where we'll see significant increases, and we continue to kind of manage that portion of the budget. On the revenue side of the budget, we've made some hard decisions. We've talked about this using our 5-year forecast and really determining, where we see weaknesses in the revenue items, and made some decisions about how we deal with that. And as I talked before, we're seeing a lot of significant decreases in the line of special items of revenue. And we're making some decisions about that. We'll talk a little bit later about how we're managing that side of the budget. We've also looked at this year, there's a significant increase in our surplus. We've had $1.5 million in capital expenditures that we need to pay, that we would have otherwise had to pay over the next 3 years at $500,000 a year. With that additional surplus, we're going to put that entire amount in the budget, thereby reducing that amount have to be paid by the taxpayers over the next 3 years. And that's $500,000 for each one of those years. So I just want to recap what we've done so far in the last meeting in terms of changes. Pay off the debt with the 1.5 of surplus. We cut our deferred charges by $500,000. We used $381,000 in capital surplus to reduce the debt. We had a spike in debt, but in accordance with our debt policy, we try to manage the increase in debt by using the capital surplus. We used an additional $250,000 in surplus, and that's just to manage our way off of, we're losing almost $1 million in revenue this year. We want to do that over the next couple of years to just help us move through that. The next issue is we have a reduction in environmental trust fund of $90,000. Stony Brook Regional Authority, we're able to reduce that by $75,000 and then apply a FEMA grant to the OEM director of $50,000. Just in those items alone, if you look at the budget today, we're estimating a rate of 0.492, and that's up from the previous rate of about 1.2% increase in the rate. So that's where we stand today. It's about a 1.2%, estimated 1.2% increase in the rate. First thing I wanted to do is I know there's some council members that weren't here. I reached out to them, had some conversations, and there were some areas that they wanted to discuss. So if you don't mind, I want to just kind of talk about those things first, and then we can get back to ask for additional things from council.
Can you just clarify, the 1.2% increase, is that the increase in the budget or the increase in the levy?
Increase in the rate.
So how much is that?
In the levy rate?
Yes.
Okay.
How much does that break down to in tax dollars?
Give me 1 second. It's this one here, right? $132 on the average taxpayer. Just want to start with some of the things that were raised. Council President Miller asked me to look into one area she had a concern. If you go to you don't, I have to find where it is.
What department is?
It's one of the funny ones. I think it's in miscellaneous, which would be hazardous busing. Miscellaneous. And this is more of an explanation than anything else. One of the things each year we have a line item in the budget for hazardous pay, and that's under the miscellaneous tab. You'll see hazardous busing. We pay to the school districts. Municipalities can work with the school districts for and make an arrangement to pay for busing for any child that's on a hazardous route. You determine a hazardous route and you make an arrangement to pay. It's just an agreement between the two communities. What we are looking to do is kind of move away from that model of paying for the busing and actually work with the school districts to wean our way off of paying them for the busing, but actually then use that money to actually make improvements to pedestrian walkways to allow kids to walk to school. We think that's a better use of money rather than paying for the busing, was actually putting in improvements. So just we had some discussions about that so the council know that's the direction that we're going to be looking to go in terms of using this money in the future rather than just paying for busing on an annual basis, actually make some capital.
Have you done any outreach to the schools on that yet, or?
I believe that we're still working on that.
I know that there's some sections that you really have to bus, like for instance, the ones that go right across 206,
Mm-hmm.
from across 206, that's like you're asking for.
Mhm.
So some areas you can make all the improvements you want, you still have to pay for busing somehow. That's the only problem. This is the town we live in.
And again, part of that school district or this arrangement, the school district is responsible, it's an optional program. It's not saying that we have to pay for it, it's something that we do. And what we're looking to is, it makes more sense to put the capital in and make it walkable in more places than it is to kind of constantly pay for hazardous busing. Next one, talked to Councilwoman Howard, and she raised two areas that she wants us to look at. So if you go to administration, I believe it's the back of administration, you'll find legal, under the legal budget. Yep.
Yep, legal.
Sorry, before we move on, I just had a question about the hazardous busing. So this would not impact this year's budget,
No, it would not.
and then going forward,
We'd work with the school.
we would still have the same amount in the budget, but
Correct.
we'd see it in a different place, and it would likely be in addition to the road projects that would
Correct.
already be there. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
One area in reviewing and discussing was legal. We've been monitoring our legal costs over the last couple of years, and we do see that there is some room, just based on historic spending, to make some reductions there, and we had a conversation, and I'm recommending under that budget a $25,000 cut in legal, and that's just based on previous year's spending.
Do you have an explanation why the spending this year was so low compared to, I mean, it was, a couple $100,000 below what was budgeted, not $25,000, so.
I'd have to go back and look at the individual line items and it's one thing that's hard because it's dependent on lawsuits that we have, what activities that we're doing, so we'd have to go back. I don't know if you've seen it, we actually have a spreadsheet that details every line item in every category. We have to go back and see where the differences for each year. And I can do that analysis and get that thing out.
And I think we also budget because of the affordable housing lawsuit. I think a lot of money probably still, I don't know if all the bills are even in.
Yeah, they're in, right? Or legal.
They're not in the legal budget, no.
Illegal.
No, we actually put them against the up to cap amount in administration.
The affordable housing.
Right.
Okay.
But in terms of the regular legal bills,
Okay.
they're all accounted for in these
Correct.
expenditures.
Right.
It just seems like it's important to understand why it was so low this year to determine the
Yeah.
right amount to reduce it by for future. Because even if the historical fees are higher, there might
As we have those
be the
details, we can
beginning of
definitely
some
do
kind
that.
of pattern or
Yes.
whatever.
The other question, if we go to planning. Raised a question that there's an increase in historic preservation. Should be the last sheet in the plan, no, almost the last sheet in the plan. And you'll see there's an increase for an architectural survey of $50,000. One, this is a project that's been in the budget, just based on our conversation with council. I don't know that this is a priority for the council. I'm recommending that we cut the $50,000 out of the budget this year.
What is it for? What is it?
It's actually to update an architectural survey that was done some years ago. It needs to be updated, but I don't know that there's an urgency for it to be updated this year. I believe it was done in, I don't remember, I'd have to get I don't want to say what the date is, but it's just what it is in the historic district. It's a survey of the architectural, I don't know.
I mean, it seems like it's related to our goal of trying to get design guidelines for the historic district and.
But it's different.
No, it's different, and I was actually, my question would be, there's a couple projects different committees have been talking about that would be helped by getting a consultant that are not in the budget, and so what's the best way for us to think about things like that and financially plan for them? You know,
We go
should we
to-
redirect this money to having somebody come in and help with a design guidelines for the CBD, for example?
One thing, if you go to the next page, actually, we've had money in last year's budget that's still there for studies. If you look at the planning board, under miscellaneous expense, we have $130,000, and that was for, well, my suggestion would be to eliminate the 50,000, we have 130, there's a number of consulting projects that I know, we were looking at the economic development, if you wanted to do the historic design areas, there is some money here where we could do that.
That's neighborhood character.
That's the neighborhood
right?
character.
For
We've already,
that 130.
right, that was, yeah, last year's, we kept it in there, but we've already paid for that contract for the neighborhood character.
But we do have another year of
Work.
right.
In,
So they've been paid for all the work that they're gonna do going forward.
No.
Is that correct?
No,
No?
that's impossible.
they've been paid for the whatever contract they currently have, that has been encumbered.
Correct.
So if whatever contract that they currently have, was encumbered last year for the entire contract.
Looney Rick's Kiss?
Hmm?
The Looney Rick's Kiss,
Yeah.
the
Yes.
current consultant?
Not the old consultant.
No, the new consultant.
All right.
So that was encumbered in last year's budget. So this money is free. We left it there because I also knew that there were some other areas in which we wanted to do some things. So what we can do is just keep that here, and I know there's a number of areas that we wanted to kind of look at. So that would be my recommendation.
So cut the 50 and draw from the 130.
Correct.
Well, and I guess that, I would just say, let's really identify which things we want to get
That's the other
consultants
question we
for
need.
this year, because knowing how much to cut will depend on
Yes.
how high of a priority and what kind of bandwidth we think we have, because, you know, these consultants are gonna have to be working with the new planner,
Right.
and, you know,
Yeah.
the new planner's just gonna be finding their
Right.
sea legs,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
And quite frankly, just based on that, I don't know that there's going to be a lot of bandwidth to do a lot of new stuff with, you know, getting a new planner coming in. So we just need to keep that in our minds.
Right. But this might be a good year to try to apply for some grants to supplement this.
Yeah.
We've been pretty successful in that in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that, I don't know if you have more stuff from Heather and Jenny, but that would be a good segue to the question I had about, I mean, the budgeting revenue from grants this year is significantly down from last year's, about 35% down. And I'm wondering, you know, at this time last year, number one, did we know all of the grants that we had? And, you know, why is the number down so far? Why aren't we? If that's the case, you know, if we knew at this time last year that we were gonna have this higher level of granting, then why aren't we going after those grants?
Here's, so that you understand, in terms of the grants, they're placed in the budget. Each year, if you'll notice, when we introduce the budget, the grants are probably lower than you will see at the end of the year, because as grants come in, they're placed into the budget. So I don't anticipate there being that great disparity just in the beginning. We can only place grants in the budget when we actually get an authorization letter. So as we go through the year, and the grants come in, you'll see them added to the budget in
But
something as far as.
they're added to the budget, not the actual. I mean,
What do you mean by that?
well, so, right, you always have two columns for income and expenditure. One is your budgeted income, and
Right.
one is your actual income for the year. So these grants that come in during the course of the year are added to the budget, not
They're-
just
So
the,
you-
not
no,
just
but-
the actual.
So he may need the forecast.
No, in terms of what happens with a grant, all of our grants, an expenditure item comes in and a revenue item comes in. They have no impact on the budget. So when we get a new grant, we just insert a line item of expenditure and an item of revenue. And we actually expend off of those grants. So each year, you'll see throughout the year, we'll eventually probably get close to that point. I wouldn't, based on what you're seeing in the budget now, I don't anticipate there being any major reductions in our grants. They just come in at different points of the year.
Yeah, actually, as I look at it, I see there is no actual,
Right.
in the revenues, it's all budgeted.
Just one more thing that we need to, just so we have in our minds as we move forward, there's one line item that we do need to change and increase in the budget, and that is our capital improvement fund. I believe I talked about this, but in order for us to fund the $9.1 million, we have to have a 5% down payment. We have budgeted only $350,000, so we need another $110,000 to cover our capital expenses. So that's an adjustment we'll have to make in the budget. And I think we can find some offsetting revenue cuts to take care of that.
Don't take that 130.
Not there. So at this point, I just wanted to open it up to questions from councils about any specific line items, and then I also have some that I'll bring to your attention, but I wanted to get council's questions or inputs on any particular line items. Or any concerns about increases in the budget or things that are not in the budget that we should have in the budget.
David, did you want to start and then Lance?
Okay.
Sure, I mean, it's really kind of a general question, because going through the various expenditures, I found probably at least half a dozen, maybe up to 10 line items where our expenditures were significantly below what was budgeted, and yet what is being budgeted for the coming year is what was budgeted last year. And so I'm guessing the explanation is different for each line item. Maybe we need to go through each of them independently, but is there a general answer?
There's a general answer. One thing we do, because in municipal budgeting, we can't do transfers until the end of the year. One of the things that we have to do each year is kind of look at the budget and anticipate what are the possibilities. So a lot of line items, you may see some years where there's, I'll call it a cushion, just to allow us to continue throughout the year, because it's not until the last November, December that we can make transfers in the budget for any line items. So you'll see there's at some point, some cushion that we have in the line items for, just what happens on a daily basis. So if you go each one of the line items, you'll see that. What we try to do as we go through the years, when we start seeing historical patterns, we can make adjustments to that line item so it doesn't get completely out of whack. But there usually is still always some type of cushion there.
And let me just jump in also, David, on, we continue to spend the 2017 budget. We'll continue till probably maybe the spring, May. We're still paying bills from last year. So the numbers that you see in the documents that you have are spending through December 31st.
Okay.
So even, the legal budget, which is one that you raised, that spending number now, on my records now includes December. So yours does not. So,
Okay.
a lot of these numbers will continue to change, and it's kind of a moving target as we go through this process.
So let's look at probably one of the most dramatic ones, which is other expenditures under the planning board, which is budgeted for $208,000, and the actual expenditures were $15,000 and change. Do we know why that's so low?
Let's go to the plan. You're looking at the summary sheet.
I'm looking at the summary sheet.
If you go to the,
This is
Go
the
to the
second
detail
page
line
of the
item.
expenditure summary at the bottom.
but if you go to the line item, the actual detail, line item, you
It does not include the encumbered, so it would not, the contract that we have with the planner or any of the consultants for the neighborhood study, we've only captured on this document the amounts that are expended. We still have an encumbrance sitting on the book, so we still have a balance left to pay them, which is what I mentioned before, what we'll continue to draw down during this year.
Okay.
So, and in last year's planning budget,
So
there
now-
was not only the Withers, there was the neighborhood character study, there was also master plan and ordinance work that was going to be continued, And last year's budget also included $40,000 for the Witherspoon corridor, which has not moved forward as well. So there were some big things that we budgeted for last year that, you know, we're still, I think,
Right.
working on.
Okay, so, so that encumbrance, say for Looney Rick's Kiss, could be built through the whole year.
That's
not-
correct.
Not just through
Right.
the spring that you were sort of suggesting before. Okay. Miscellaneous expenses under public safety, we spent $178,000, $286,000 was budgeted, $287,000. So 100, we're 110,000 under what was budgeted. Is there
And again, it's better if you look at the details, so you can kind of see, if you go to the detail page on other expenses, and I'm gonna make an assumption and I get you the right answer. Biggest line item there is for our vehicles. My assumption there would be is that's $160,000 we have for our vehicles. That process usually takes a while. We may even have encumbrances for that.
We actually paid for those vehicles in, I believe in February. So there's $132,000 additional dollars that's expended out of the 2017 budget that you're not seeing.
Okay. Probably similar under police, other expenses for police. It's about half. We've spent, according to the summary, $156,000 out of $325,000.
That's where the
the
police
vehicle.
vehicle line is.
Okay.
That's the
Right.
biggest portion of that budget.
Much smaller line item, but under Sustainable Princeton, $30,000 was budgeted and $20,000 was spent.
And that was also expended this year for last year's.
And just so you understand, the way their contract works is they receive, for a number of line items, they receive on a quarterly basis a payment to complete those line items. And then at the end of the year, they bill us for other items and review those. You guys just went on a bill list, I think, the last meeting.
Okay.
Do you have more questions, David, or should we move on?
I mean, I guess I do. You know, they're similar, but I think they're going to have slightly different answers, so I'd sort of like to hear them. For instance, under the Senior Citizens Program, we spent about $60,000, about 25% less than what was budgeted. And I'm curious, or maybe that is just a billing lag as well, something that came in after the end of December.
That might be because part of that is the crosstown, right?
Right, and we probably had not paid Crosstown's December bill at the time those numbers were run. We wouldn't have gotten their bill until January, probably the end of January.
We probably talked about this, but I don't remember exactly what the answer is. Under the Deer Management Program, there's a very big uptick in the budget this year, despite the fact that last year we spent less than what was budgeted, so.
Actually, this year's contract, we actually changed the contract because last year's contract, I'm not getting the details completely correct, but I know we ended it early and we had some issues with the contract. So this year's contract was actually beefed up, and that's why you have the additional cost. It's based on the entire contract was actually increased from last year.
It's the same contractor, White Buffalo?
Yes, it is. And I think they're also doing another component as a survey or something else that they're doing another piece on this year.
I'm going to make this my last question, leave some for other people. But there are two items. One is under utilities, there's a line item for electric and gas, and then there's a separate line item for natural gas. And I'm confused. And again, both of those line items were way under what was budgeted. It seems like maybe there's some savings there as well if rates are lower or our use, or we're more conserving in our practice. But
Just like this is an area where we probably could savings for two reasons. One, looking at the historic spend here, and also we're doing the online auction for utility rates. And she just sent me something indicating that they will be able to provide a lower rate. So I think this is an area where, this is one of the areas using the utilities where I think we can make up the increase that we need for the capital improvement fund. We can make some reductions there to kind of justify that.
Good job,
Sorry,
Councilman
sorry
Gold.
to not.
No, you're not right. No, please, feel free. Look, we have until 12 o'clock. Go on. The $9,000 that we used to collect from Church and Dwight, we don't collect that anymore? Is that because?
It's a grant. Oh, that actually,
Was it like a pilot or something? I don't remember what you call it. They payment in lieu of, they were giving us $9,000?
I think that's a grant that goes to the foundation,
Right.
not us. And last year we put it in our budget by, in error. And
Oh,
it should go directly to the foundation.
Oh.
It comes back to us eventually,
I was
but
wondering.
we
if that's
kind of
all-
double counted it, both in the amount that the foundation gets back to us and in the grant.
Okay. Corner House, I noticed that we had some problem with that, so I actually met with Gary Bosio and so forth myself, this budget, because I was wondering, a little concerned. But he did tell me that in the salary line item last year, that they had a $35,000, $700 reduction they didn't use.
They had $35,000 left that they did not use in their salary budget last year due to vacancies and some people that went from part-time to, or from full-time to part-time. So there was a few things that were going on last year in their salary budget.
So on page 5 of the expenditure summary, and we looked under drug abuse program Corner House, and we see the $40,000 difference. Would that be minus the $35,000?
I don't know if it'll be the full $35,000, because it'll be, some of this is, and that's what we're looking at, we're actually, one of the things we're gonna have to make an adjustment is for that. We just need to make sure it's a real reduction and not just a savings in the salary because we started someone in part of the year. So it may not be exactly 35, but it'll be, I think, a significant change there.
And the other thing is, as you know, the way that the program, as you know, the way that payments are done now, across a lot different. So they predicted $80,000 for Medicaid dollars, but they received $110,000,
Right.
which was a good thing. And then they predicted $60,000 for state dollars, but only received $44,000. And they predicted $11,000 for Mercer County, and that's where I need to speak to Mayor about, and only received $5,000.
Right.
And predicted $75,000 for drug court and only received $31,000. So it was a rough year. But they're predicting that things should level out now, am I correct?
Yeah, we met with Gary as well last week, and you know, I think that we can fine tune some of his revenues, so maybe drop some of the ones like from the county and the state, but then increase the Medicaid, which is where they're predominantly getting a lot of their money from now. So I think that the net effect will end up being a zero change for him.
Oh, good. I know that the foundation said that they can raise, I guess they paid $230,000 last year.
And we increase that
The
to
$240,000. Yeah, and I think they said they were fine with that.
Okay, good.
Good.
One of the things that, as our elected officials, that would be, one of the issues that we're having, I know with Cornell, one of the concerns are, one, there are some state dollars and maybe with the new administration that
Yeah.
we can see if that can become available
Yeah.
for drugs. And there's also county dollars that we should talk and see if those dollars could also be freed up to Princeton.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm hoping that you as elected officials can help us with.
Okay.
Mr. Quinn?
So, employee group insurance, we caught a break last year with that, and the question is this enough that's budgeted? So, last year 4.7, we used 4.1, and now we have 4.5. Can we expect to continue to get that kind of break going forward?
No.
No? So
I've never seen it before.
I know.
Don't hold back, just
So
be
the
honest,
question
Mark. Don't hold back.
is 4.5 or it's 4.6 if you round up, is that going to be enough? Or, so what happens when it comes in at, you know, 7% or 10% increase?
This should be enough for this year. And a lot of these, part of this was the reduction in headcount, reduced that quite a bit. And the other are just the rates. We've already calculated based on what we know the rates are for this year. We're fine for this year. What happens next year? I used to think I could kind of figure out what it is, not anymore. But one thing we have done is we've hired, as you know, in January, the new broker to really get aggressive in looking at health insurance, whether it's state health benefits plan is the best plan, and just small little things. They've already been very successful for us. One of the areas is our dental plan, and it may seem like it's minor, but it's wonderful to us. Our dental plan used to require us to verify students that were in school that were up to 23 in school. And we literally, our HR department had to send out these notes and get verification and sign off. It was very time consuming. They were able to work with the provider. We no longer have to do that. They will cover them up to 23, period. No change in the rates. So that it's been so far a very successful thing to bring in a new broker.
And the line item above that, workers' comp, what is that forecasted decrease? Why are we thinking that we'll go from 402 to 397? No one's gonna get hurt?
No, this is just based on our one, some reductions we had in the headcount, and two, based on the JIF's projected insurance increase for the JIF.
Thank you.
Yes, so mine's more of a general question, so you'll have to excuse me if it's generally known already. But I know that our new governor is working or promising to work on increasing the minimum wage. And I know it's an unknown, and if it happens, it's not going to happen right away. But I wonder how we can prepare for the unknown. I understand the main department that's going to be impacted probably would be rec.
Right.
Maybe the summer youth employment program.
Right.
Are there any others? And how would we, how do we address that?
I believe you actually hit the two departments where that I think that would be the only area that would be impacted. Since Racing actually didn't think about that.
And there was a big revenue drop
I
for
was
the
gonna say, a lot
summer.
of the rec people that are in the summer are paid through the rec trust, so it's not even reflected in this budget.
No, okay.
But the summer youth certainly would be, and then in Public Works, they have some summer kids that they hire as well.
I think that
But,
there may be a slight increase.
but doesn't it depend on the length of time they work also? I know when we look at
I'm not sure.
Because you're thinking about sick leave, but no,
Oh,
for minimum wage.
For minimum wage,
Yeah.
okay, minimum wage, okay, I'm thinking about sick leave.
So that was actually a question I had. There was a $20,000 drop in income for the student summer employment program, the summer youth.
That was a grant that they
Right.
received last year.
Yes, yeah.
If she gets it, we'll put it back in the budget,
Yeah,
but
there's a grant, yeah.
at the time that we prepared the budget, she was not aware that she was getting that again.
That is something we need to kind of make sure we address it somehow, that we have some cushion to deal with if there is a change in the minimum wage. So that's a very good point.
But for the rec department, so there's a trust?
What would happen for the rec department, all of their recreation programs are run through the fees they collect for that program.
Right.
So what would happen there,
Increase?
more than likely, would be an increase in the fees to cover that cost. If you look at this budget, the only thing that's covered for recreation are things like the salary and wages, park improvements, you'll see a line for parks and kind of those areas. So that's where you will see it, and it's going to be an interesting thing we'll have to try to deal with if that does happen.
Okay, thank you.
I had a few questions. But first, I just wanted to reiterate the point that Lance was making, Mark was making about trying to be as even more aggressive than we normally are with like the state and county resources. And so, I mean, I'm sure everybody on council agrees with me, oftentimes we don't know the details of what the departments might be eligible for, so to just send that message back to department heads, and we're happy to advocate in whatever way we can. So I think that's, especially with, well, I think in both cases, but I know that the county, the equalization rate this year is not going to work in Princeton's favor, and
No.
it's,
Understatement.
You know what I'm saying?
yeah, so
Oh, no.
we need to make sure we're advocating as best we can. The second question I had was on page 4 of the revenue summary. Oh, no, sorry, page 1 of the revenue summary. And I'm not sure if this would fall under interest and costs on taxes or interest on investments and deposits. But, we all heard about the just huge increase in the number of people who are paying their taxes in advance. And so we have millions more dollars than we normally do, and I'm just wondering what sort of interest difference that makes, and it doesn't seem to be reflected in the budget. And,
Yeah, I mean, it's a short term for us, because we still have to pay county and school, so it's nice to be in a positive cash flow where obviously we are after collecting $28 million more. But, I mean, I left the interest on investments pretty much the same as it was last year because I don't like to see the peaks and valleys. So I think that, yeah, we'll definitely collect more in this year's budget. So we could anticipate more, but like I said, I
What I
felt
would
more
recommend
comfortable
is
just
to go to
leaving it.
surplus,
I see, because you don't
Because
want to
when
get
I-
into trouble for next
and then you have the
budget.
next year's
Right.
budget, it won't be
Right.
there.
Okay, but do
More
you,
conservative, but
right, or is it something where we move it into cash capital instead of surplus?
I don't think we have a good idea. Do you have any idea what that would be at this point? I think it's better to do it if you're gonna do it, because we don't know what that's gonna be. You're gonna have at the end of the year a full interest rate, and if next year maybe that's an area we say, take some more money out of that to do a cash capital.
But it's not going to be there next year because there's no incentive to prepay next year.
No.
Oh.
You're gonna realize it as
I see.
surplus
I
next
see,
year.
I got it, okay. And then, for the cable TV, this is also under revenues.
Mhm.
That seemed to be going
Went down.
down,
Yeah.
and is that,
Something I actually missed. Good pickup.
Yeah.
It's typical, right? Because the.
No, it actually should be $100,000 there. We initially forecasted it at 75, being conservative. Now that we have the revenue that came in, we can bump that up to 25, and then we're doing.
Where is that?
Which
That should be on
I
page
saw- I
3
read-
of the revenue.
Yeah, I read it before. Yeah, I see here, page 3 at the bottom.
okay,
Yeah, I saw that.
so that is holding relatively steady then, at least?
Yeah.
Oh, I looked at.
So we think 100,000 makes sense. We were conservative when we initially did the budget, so we can add $25,000 to it.
Okay, that's good.
Boy,
I
see,
wasn't
look.
anticipating that answer.
You're glad you're here, George. Glad you're here. Look, George, you done made 25,000.
And,
That'll make for good TV.
Is that a separate line item from what we get paid by Comcast and Verizon for
That's
the
it.
use of the
Verizon
streets?
and
Or
Comcast.
that's what that is?
No, that's for
That's where it comes
the franchise fees.
Yeah,
It is.
and that's both of them combined.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe you're gonna go into this in a minute, but do you see areas of opportunity for budget? I know last year we had talked about dispatch and looking into dispatch, which we ended up doing, and it's reflected in this year's budget, but do you see things that we could be working on this year, not necessarily for this year's budget, but for following year?
At this point, we're getting real close in terms of areas that I kind of see where you can make major changes in the budget. I think what we should be looking at moving forward is getting a better handle on our expenditures, the actual expenditures, and how close we can make that cushion is really where I would say we should spend the next year, and just making sure that, there's areas where we can make some reductions, we do, and really looking at those past expenditures and determine what's the right cushion that we should have. That's where I'm saying, in terms of organizationally, at least at this point, I don't see it. I think we can continue to look at the budget if there are areas. And it usually happens as we see turnover, we kind of see opportunities sometimes. I don't, right as of now, I just don't see it.
I know that Councilman Quinn was expressed interest in doing something together with the school district to look at, for example, public
Shared
works
services.
/ facilities, shared services.
Sure.
I mean, that's not.
That's actually very good.
There's not like study money in the budget for that, or is that something that you would anticipate coming later? I mean, it's probably premature
I
to
think
stick
that-
it in if we haven't had the conversation.
Right, I think the first part of that would be a lot of this groundwork we can do staff to staff,
Okay,
and not have to put that in to the budget right now. If we come to that point, I think we could probably, someone here find something to do a little bit.
okay. And then, can you just explain the process for the public being able to see some of this information? At what point does it get posted, and do we have a copy of the library?
Yes. Once the budget is introduced, a copy of the state form would be available. I will also redo the entire book that you have. We'll put that on the website for the public to see. That'll probably, just because of the time frame in the introduction, that will probably not be until later in the week. But immediately Monday night, we can have the actual budget document, the summary sheet we could probably have, but the details will be probably put on the website later. It'll be at the library for anyone to look at. So we'll have all that on the website, the clerk's office, or at the end of the library.
Okay, so that's on Monday, people can find it.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then Scott Solers is here. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Hey,
do you have
Scott.
anything that you wanted to say?
Well, generally, there's not a lot going on in the budget compared to last year, but we're in pretty good shape. Mark and I and Sandy have had a couple of sessions in CFAC on the budget. The things that we're going to look back and look at are making sure that those departments that have sources of outside revenue, and that we have an expectation that they're going to fund themselves with that outside revenue, and that we're going to contribute a kind of fixed amount, are doing that. The easiest example is the library, because it's just one line item in the budget, and you can see just by looking at one line whether that is the case. In others, the easiest example is Corner House. It's just littered throughout the budget, and it's very easy for us to miss the fact that their revenues are going down, but their expenses are going up. And hearing what Lance said, it looks like they've got that under control, and we just haven't heard it. So those are the type of things we're looking at. And as far as the overall, how does it compare to surplus policy? We generated excess surplus last year from what we anticipated, but we've got a good plan on utilizing it. Put it right back in the budget. Cleaning up some past sins with the capital, and utilizing a little bit more into the budget process, into surplus revenue. The one thing that we can, the second point I make is, the one thing that we continue to beef about at the CFAC is the fact that the budgets are kind of state-driven, and they don't really reflect what's actually going on. And you can see that when you look at the actual column versus the budget column. And Sandy's going to go back and she's going to pull the last few years worth of budget actuals when the year finally closes out, so that we could see what's really going on in the underlying spending, so that you can see if other expenses budgeted at $200,000 a year, but we're consistently spending only $50,000. Does it make sense to continue budgeting that way? It's not going to, at the end of the day, probably change our budgeting practices, because we've got to continue to play this state game of replenishing the surplus that we're using in the appropriations at the start of the year. But there could be a way that we could just clear all that stuff out and put it in one line somewhere, and make it a little bit clearer for people to see what we're budgeting compared to what we've actually spent in past years. There's a lot of reasons not to do that from the state budget perspective, but other towns have successfully done it. You know, one possibility is that the budget that the town that the town sees and manages is one budget, and the state filing is another budget. And you just have confidence that in between the two, the CFO is doing a good job of making sure that, you know, she's got her bases covered on complying with all the various restrictions that the state puts on it. At the same time, making it easy for the community to see what's actually going on in the budget. So,
The one big thing we didn't talk about was parking, and it looked like the court revenues were about $1 million. And we talked about this at the agenda meeting earlier this week about what percentage of that was actually coming from parking tickets. And there seemed to be a question mark with regards to that. But I mean, there's a big exposure there as we move to the new meter technology.
that's our first assignment.
Okay, great.
Mark reminded me of that yesterday morning.
Have we got a lot of money for the Emerald Ash Borer? I know Bernie's not here, that's the first thing he'll say.
We have $300,000 in the capital for that.
That's another thing?
That's in the yes.
I couldn't find the PCTV expenditure line item, and I don't know if you know offhand where it is, but.
We don't, how do we, that's a good question.
CCTV, we collect the money from Verizon and Comcast. We put it in our trust account, and the money, we actually just issued the check to them based on the agreement that we had previously approved. I think it was about 242, 232. So they've already got their money, and the 75 that we have in there that we're increasing to 100 is the excess money that we've collected.
Okay, because I thought that seemed low from what I had heard, that those utilities were actually paying us.
Right.
Okay.
And we're also in the middle of negotiations for the new contract.
Right.
Shouldn't we see both of those numbers then? Shouldn't we see the full amount that's coming in and the amount that's going out?
We don't run it through this budget, we run it through our trust account.
I see, okay.
But that's a good example of, you know, we've got various accounting practices for organizations that have their own source of funding, and it's you got to use a different approach on each one, whether you're finding out whether they're spending your money or their money or.
Yeah.
And if you remember a while ago, there was a point, I think it may have even been pre-consolidation, where we were running the cable TV money through here, but we were turning over a lot more of it to
Yeah.
cable
Right,
TV
yeah.
up until we did this last agreement.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it might be worthwhile to put into this sort of budget calendar after all of the budget is done, to do something in May or June to take a look at all of those other funds, just so council has a sense of where we are. So open space fund, the parking authority fund, the affordable housing fund,
Yeah.
shade tree, just so we get a snapshot of where things are.
I'd love to see.
Yeah.
I have a couple more.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, no, just you.
I just go back to the question of the Public Works possible consolidation or sharing of services, or, so when you say the initial piece of this is going to be the staff to staff, is that you and Sandy and the superintendent, and so my question is, if we ask Public Works on both sides to look at sharing services and possibly consolidating.
And
I think
saving
they're gonna-
money,
And saving money, I think they're gonna conclude that things are fine the way they are.
There's a-
Which is why I suggested in conversations with the superintendent that we both kick in a little bit of money to fund a third-party study of this, as opposed to.
And I agree with you, but I would think the first step, even if you want to do that, would be to get them to talk. We may be surprised what we may come up with, and it's always easier to implement something when it's coming from those people. We may eventually, I think, get to that point, and And I was just thinking what the first step would be to get them to talk. They may come back and say nothing, then you may want to bring it
Well,
up.
I mean, when it was raised in committee, it was, you know, and naturally, it was sort of, everything's fine the way it is, there's no need to change.
I mean, basically, they're saying we already do.
We already
shared
do that,
services.
we don't need to do more, but they weren't
And we don't
talking
need to
about
keep on
the
tracking
staffing
dollars
piece.
behind it.
They talked about,
I wasn't in the meeting, so
yeah, well, they talked about what trucks they share,
Yes.
not what,
Tree trucks,
what personnel
Yeah.
they share.
And I think one of the areas that is a natural area to look at is, and I've seen work in other communities, are maintenance, mechanics, and you start in that area. And I think that's an area where there is an opportunity.
Mhm.
And that's an area where I don't think either party can disagree with and say we're not doing it. There are some areas, and that's where I would kind of start the focus would be there.
So, because part of the school's referendum as presented initially, and we don't have a price, obviously, part of that description was a workshop for their public works.
Oh.
So if
Perfect opportunity.
Which they already have at the Valley Road.
they have at Valley Road, if they repurpose Valley Road as a school, then there's gonna need to be, there's an opportunity there.
Absolutely.
So, anyway.
I think that's a good place to start, and that's an area where I think you're not going to get as much resistance between the parties. You know, when you bring it up generally, you always get that. I even get that feedback, but I think if you probe some very specific areas, everybody can kind of agree. It doesn't matter what the vehicle is, quite frankly. You know, if you have enough mechanics, you can get that done.
Well,
That's an area I think to start, but I think
You know, I mean, and I think it has to be presented not only in savings, but in better services. So a unified staff could provide potentially expanded service in addition to a cost savings. It's just based on seasonal, staffing and based on, the schools have a need for more people during one season that might not match when we have a need for more people.
And are there channels that do that now that we can look for as an example?
Franklin does it.
Franklin does it?
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
and there are other municipalities that basically have one public works department that.
Does everything?
Because I raised this at the league at my orientation, and 2 or 3 communities, smaller communities than ours, but have done a sort of trade-off where the municipality provides public works and the schools kick in something else to the municipality, like IT or
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
Another.
But in terms of, just,
No, go ahead.
just in terms of the consultant, what I would suggest is we start there, and if we do want to bring a consultant in, there are some line items in administration where we can pull that money from, so
Okay.
I don't know that we need to add additional dollars.
Okay, yeah, no, I wasn't advocating for that, I figured that we could find it.
They don't have
I
money.
figured we could find, that it's a relatively small
Yes.
amount, that we could find it, and that there's a willingness across the street to kick in half to study this, so.
And I just wanted to mention, sort of suggested by Tim's comment about better services. One of the things that I've been hearing a little bit about is the difficulties of maintaining our trees, because that's split actually 3 ways, like the schools and Public Works and Rec all have responsibilities, separate areas of responsibility for tree maintenance, and it would be really good to get that coordinated.
I wanted to open it up to see if there's any public comment.
Before we do that.
Oh, yeah,
I just
sorry,
go-
Mark,
just
yeah.
have 2 things that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want
please.
just bring to everyone's attention, which I'm going to suggest. One, if we go to administration again, under IT, in reviewing IT, there is when we changed our interlocal agreement with the Board of Ed, we actually double counted and put in the consultant fee twice, so we can reduce that by $46,000. So that's an area I want to bring everyone's attention.
IT, and what area, where in IT, the IT support services?
So it's under, where you see the big increase in IT support services. So that can be reduced And the increase there, it used to be in salary and wages. When we actually hired the employee, that moves down to other expenses, and it goes from $130,000 to 60-something thousand. So we can make that reduction again. And then there is one more. Fire. That would be under the Office of Emergency Management. Second page in. You'll see a line item for computer expenses, an additional $15,000. That can be reduced. I believe that's for the mobile eye, the introduction of mobile eyes. That's already budgeted in the information technology department, so the reduction of 15 there.
So is that line item 233?
Yes,
And you want to reduce it by 15?
50. And that's the increase this year. And then if you go down to equipment repair and maintenance, you'll see an increase of $10,000. I'm recommending we bring that back to zero. And again, I looked at just the historical spending in this area. We should be fine. And then right underneath that, which is other contractual items, there's been a $15,000 increase there also. And again, bringing that back down to last year just based on historical. So that's just change that I recommend.
Was that requested by Bob Gregory? Or
It was requested by Bob Gregory.
did he give an explanation why he requested an increase? You know?
They try to estimate what their repairs are each year. And basically what I'm looking at, just if you look at historically what we use in those areas, it's not just that. I know they're trying to anticipate. But from when I can look at back, I can see it's just not, we have enough money there to pay for it. I don't see a need for it. It's just my judgment on making that kind of judgment call.
I mean, we yelled at. All right.
You can all blame me, that was me.
No, before I go. Don't come to my house.
So then I'd like to open it up then, if there's anyone. Yeah, please.
I noticed in the paper yesterday, they mentioned municipalities in the area were getting monies from the Transportation Trust Fund. I'm sure there's a good reason why Princeton wasn't on that list, even though some of our neighbors.
Oh, we did get some.
We did get, oh, it
Yeah,
just in the paper
this-
failed to
This is for
report.
the municipal aid. I think that article was just for the other legislative district. That's why, because we're not in the 15th
We're not,
district.
right,
We're
the
in
16th.
Right, so we received a little over $900,000 in
Okay.
conjunction with Montgomery
Right.
for the Cherry Valley Road project.
Oh, okay. So the way the Tretonian wrote the article, they were just talking about, it seemed like they were talking about like Mercer County, they were criticizing Trenton for failing to
Right,
apply,
they
et
were
cetera.
talking about
But
the
they did,
they were talking about the 15th legislative
Oh,
district.
okay.
and
No,
we're-
yeah, the article, they didn't mention
and
the
we're in
district
the
or anything.
16th.
Yeah, right, okay. So
Yeah,
that
we
answers
did get
it.
it,
So
yes.
we did get one.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Anybody else?
Thank you for having us, first of all, and great process like what you're going through. Like, sorry, I'm a little cold, but again, I think looking at it and running a business for hundreds of millions of dollars, and I understand the process here, a little different, but the goals are the same. How can we provide the best services and best quality of life to our community with the budgets that we have, hopefully without any increases in taxes, with that which are coming up. And there are a number of things that, looking from a different perspective, consolidating. For example, I think Tim mentioned that, Mr. Quinn mentioned that there's $4.6 million for dental and medical insurance and all that. Understand that. Any possibility that, these are all for our employees and for our, so that's something we can consolidate with some towns next to each other. When you go talk to the insurance people, that make a bigger pool and get a savings. Similar, like I think you mentioned that There could be some savings when we consolidate among different groups. Schools, you know, that's half of our money goes to them. I'm sure they have their own plans, and whether it's maintenance, or whether it's IT, or whether it's building or construction, how can we have the savings working together? Our goal is to minimize our whatever budget. We haven't seen that, whether it's 62 million that I did see in 2017. How can we kind of do it more efficiently? How can we kind of make it, our dollar go further and help the community that we are all here for? And there are a number of items that, you know, once I look at the 2018 and compare with the, not just 2015, 16, and go back to the history, then look at what the other communities showed to us, compare that. Are there something that we could learn from it? And those are the kind of things that we need to not just see what we have done historically, what can we do to really take a different look at it. Look at out of the box. Look at like what we can do to make that dollar go further. And so there are a number of items that we will definitely, as a public, like to share with you, because as I said, like coming from private businesses where we have the same process and we actually make money, but here our goal should be to run the business like, I mean, the government like a business in a sense. There are a number of things that we do that we can help you to implement. Yes, there are certain rules and regulations that we follow from the state that even there, we don't have to kind of just take it. We have the state legislature, we should talk to them, we should talk to the people who have made those rules. So let's make them kind of like not just look at like a small entity, look at from a holistic and systems perspective. How can we make the process better and save? And at the same time, our goal is always to improve the quality of our life. So I think like we'll be very willing to and share our experiences, share our knowledge, share our competency that we have developed for years and years, you know, and we will be glad to, and you know, anybody
Thank you.
like to talk, I'll be happy to offer those suggestions.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who?
No, but have we ever thought about that? I mean, I'm just thinking about towns combining with.
In terms of the insurance,
State.
and
The state,
but two things that I'll talk about. One, just so that the public understands, in terms of our workers' compensation, our liability insurance, we do pool our resources in what we call a joint insurance fund.
JIF.
So we do that, our JIF. And in terms of the health insurance, we're in the state health benefits plan, but one of the things, and I talked a little bit earlier about the broker, there are also things we call HIFs, which are municipalities getting together to do the same thing as a joint insurance fund. They're going to be looking into that to find out what is our best alternative. So we are looking at a lot of things that you talked about. I was glad to hear because it's a lot of the things that we talked about. If you, as I started this thing, talked about some of the things that we've done in terms of trying to be creative, and we do that a lot. And try to think of what's the best ways we can do things. We've done quite a bit of that and work with the Citizens Finance Committee in doing those things. So I'd welcome you to come to one of those meetings. You can kind of see how we think about this, because we do a lot of thinking and planning about how we put together our
I
budgets.
appreciate that.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, David.
I'll just comment also that I know I was in a group within the last month that was talking about looking at the services that are rendered in other towns and sort of the bang that they're getting for their buck. It wasn't so much trying to think, can we look at how they're spending and do it for less, but I see it as a negotiating piece for our relationship with the university, because I think to the extent that in Montgomery maybe they've got the same level of services as we have, but they're paying less in taxes, that can be partly attributed to the fact that we have more tax exempt properties in town, and that we should be talking to the university about that as a as a bargaining tactic. Scott, was that something we talked about on CFAC, or was it another group?
Well, that's how their contribution was established, the calculation that included all this.
Yeah.
Included looking at other towns and the level of services that they're receiving versus their ratables?
No, but, that's kind of beside the point, because the university does not use those kind of services. But if you look at the university.
No, that's not the question. The question is, what price are we paying as a town as a result of having Princeton located here with
Yeah,
their tax
that's
exempt
always been
properties? Hmm?
That's always been. We can go through it again, but that's kind of part of the exercise.
We can take the conversation
Yeah.
offline, but I just think that it's an interesting exercise to be
But
looking at.
benchmarking compared to other towns, that's something that we kind of, a project that's ongoing in the background at the CFAC, that kind of like when everybody's not too tired to
Right.
do it, they put another line item on the spreadsheet of, this is what other towns are spending. There is some interesting information there.
Yeah.
I think looking at it like, are we paying because we live in Princeton, because, go across the street, across Promise Line, are they paying less than us? It's like just looking at and comparing, are we paying more than we need to? Remember, we're still the same people. We probably have more healthy people, I'm just saying. So we should look at that, and also, talking about that, in private business, like, are the employees supposed to share some of the medical and dental deductibles and expenses and all that? So look at, it's a joint effort. Everybody has to chip in, so it's not like just the taxpayer has to chip in. It's the people who work and people who provide these services, which they're doing great, and I think we're very proud of them. But at the same time, we have to look at what can they do, contribute to our reducing the budgets. So we have to kind of look at it as an outside of the box. Again, I don't want to kind of just say, hey, I know the solution, but until when I look at it, I compare and I make my own spreadsheet and see what happens, why are we doing what we are doing, and looking at, for example, the library, 600K that they're looking for. My first reaction was, first thing that goes in the air conditioner is the big capacitor. And I have done that at home. Next one is the compressor. Sometimes you can do those things, not lower cost. You can get a rebuilt compressor or an air conditioning unit. You can look at all that from technical perspective. What is that? How long that has been there? Do we really need 600K, or can we do it at 300K? That is similar reliability or even improved reliability? Because those are the kind of things that our engineering department should be looking at. It really, do we need 600K? Help them. Where did they get those estimates? And how can we have great talent in this town that we can help. We have, it's unbelievable. We have engineers, we have technicians, we have economists, everybody. So we are here to help. And that's kind of like, I look at, we can help.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, we appreciate that. And I also just want to thank, we have a fabulous professional staff too, and I want to thank
Yes.
all your work that went into this budget. And I want to thank the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee for your help and your help with long-term forecasts. And I actually have an exciting announcement. Oh yeah, go ahead.
A quick question. So going back to personnel that you started with, you said in 2015 we had 218 personnel, 2018 you're anticipating 2007. How does that add up?
207.
I'm sorry. Sorry, a little zero got added in there. How does that work out in terms of what we're actually paying?
Just to give you some idea,
Right.
and just in this year's budget, if we look at,
And I don't think that the dispatchers are included in that number either, right? Mark?
What's that?
That is probably accounting for a lot of the decrease.
No, it is, I don't think the dispatchers.
Oh, that's
The dispatchers is really the decrease. If you look, I'm trying to find the salary wage number real quick.
So it's.
Okay, if you look just in this year's budget, just to give you an idea of kind of where we are, from 17 to 18, just in terms of salary and wages, that decreased 400, is that right? 400, scary. $460,000 just over those 2 years. I mean, just over that year. That just gives you some idea of where we are. And I believe, I'm going by memory, our salary, what we're budgeting in salary wages has not, if you look at the numbers, there's not a lot of growth over the years. You may have it over there. You could probably tell me.
Did that 460 go into simply paying the new dispatching company? How much of that is a real decrease in expense? And
If you look at this in terms of the real decrease is more $200,000 if you net it out.
And you don't anticipate any further staff reductions or areas?
This year, no.
No. Thanks.
Okay, so before we conclude, I just got some very exciting news that I
Oh.
wanted to share with everybody. So speaking of grants, Princeton is one of the finalists for the Bloomberg
Oh,
competition.
you're kidding me!
Yeah.
Oh my God!
So we're one of 35 champion cities in the US.
Whoa.
So we get $100,000 to test out our idea, which
Yeah.
has to do with improving food waste. And we're now in the running for a $5 million grant, and then they also have four
Jeez.
$1 million grants. So we'll be competing with the other 35 towns in this.
For what?
For food waste.
Oh, right.
It's almost
Yeah.
as good as getting Amazon to relocate.
Oh my God, can we get
And more
Amazon?
direct, too, yeah.
Can we get Amazon? I mean,
So
that-
anyway,
That'd be wonderful.
That would
for
suck.
that, I especially want to thank Matt Wasserman, who
Look,
sort of helped really put together the application under the
Excellent.
wire. So sometimes the deadline pressure really helps. But there'll be more on that to come, but
Thank
it's
you.
exciting
Great. Good
for
job.
Princeton to be included in that. And with that, if there's no other comments, then.
Move
I
to
will-
adjourn?
Yes, is there a
Second,
second? All right,
second.
all in favor?
Hi.
All right, thanks, everybody.